Hello and welcome to the podcast by Cruel Commons, where we talk about art, advertising, and culture. I'm Julia, and to the left of me, I have my lovely co-host, Dom. Dom, how's it going?
I'm doing well. How you doing?
Pretty good. Just, happy I'm not working right now, to be honest.
I'm just happy there's no construction noise outside. So they turned off the Bobcat for a bit. We'll see how it holds up. But they let us come back for a second episode. I'm happy it got approved. It passed through legal. We're good to go. But yeah, excited to be on here today. In the first episode, we went through the history of Cruel. Mm-hmm. We talked about, the origins. We talked with the founders about, their kind of come up story in that time. Mm-hmm. And today we'll kind of pick up where we left off with the first episode and talk about some more client work and some fun stuff we've done over the last few years. Yeah.
So without further ado, we'd like to introduce another Cruel member, a graphic designer, but more than just a graphic designer. He's an architecture addict, design obsessed, I would say, and also the philosopher behind the Cruel system. And overall, just a lovely, amazing person. James Nahhas, welcome to the podcast.
Welcome, James.
Thank you. That's the nicest intro I've ever got anywhere.
Did I pronounce the last name right? Because Justin, your brother, and you have different pronunciations for your last name, and it really freaks me out.
Next question.
Okay.
I already messed up Carl's introduction and mispronounced Carl's name, which was
that was a big
not
thing.
Embarrassing at all, and he's definitely not holding that against me now. So I'm glad I wasn't doing the intro today. I've gotten off scot-free on that one.
That's why you gave it to me.
You want to try it again? Just
James Nahhas.
I was going to say Carl.
Perfect.
Carl Beshman is the intro. Yeah. Well, anyway, James, how's it going today?
That's good. It's good. It's nice being recorded. It's good, but it's good to be with you guys and talk like this. I've been watching. Big fan of the podcast. Actually, I'm a super fan of the podcast more than anything else.
Thank you.
But yeah, it's nice to pick up the story kind of from where Carl and Skylar left off and the year we met and stuff like that. And nice being in this space and talking to you guys after 5, almost 6 years now.
Yeah, that sounds so romantic. The year we met.
Yeah. Also in our home. Yeah, we're sitting in our home talking about the year we met. But yeah, let's. We kind of left off in 2016, mm-hmm. 2017 on the last episode.
Right before the entry of Julia.
Right before the entry of Julia. Right before the entry of myself and Mac as well. Shout out Mac. So yeah, let's start off in 2017 because that was a time when we kind of really started to take off as a creative agency. Really kind of had that focus on really taking marketing and creative seriously.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's talk a little bit about that because I know at that time, it was a period of my life at least where I was trying to figure out where and what I wanted to do. And I think that Cruel kind of answered that question for me, which was that you could kind of invent what we wanted to do, right?
Before we get into the story, do you remember the first time we met?
I do remember the first time we met because I went to shake your hand and you just stonewalled me.
I remember that day like yesterday. We pulled up at the old Liberty Street office. It's crazy thinking about that office because we only spent, I guess, a short time in there now, relative, but all the memories are from there.
100%.
And showed up at that office and Carl told me, he's like, hey, your art director is going to be here. I was like, what do you mean? I didn't know that I was getting
art directors?
I didn't know that we had
I didn't even know we had an art director.
Yeah, I thought this was day one. I think it was September and we drove up to Blue Mountain.
Yeah. Shout out Blue Mountain. Shout out Intro Us.
And I think that's maybe the only decamp we can talk about on the podcast.
Yeah, we don't really talk about decamp, development camp at Cruel. It's more of a secret institution, but I won't hold that against you. It's all right.
Yeah, but honestly, the culture in that office was really interesting because I think we're sitting further on this couch right now than we were sitting maybe in those desks.
Office. I could go like this and touch Carl and Mac on both sides. We could hold hands.
That's a scary thought. I never. The Carl and Mac sandwich, not a fan of that.
Cut the camera.
All right, run it back.
Yeah. But I thought so we drove up that day and the entire conversation, the entire ride. So it was you, Carl, and I that took one car, and I think Skylar and Mac took another car. And we just talked art history the entire day.
Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting because we have a similar background.
Yeah.
So like, why don't you tell everybody your background so then I don't have to sit down.
Yeah, I mean, coming from art history degree at Queen's University, shout out Queens, shout out art history students. Yeah, I think that like it was a really interesting backing to the work that we're doing now, and still kind of informs the work that we're doing today. But for me, I was kind of at the time like, oh, am I actually ever going to use like this skill set? I think everyone asked that in university, but
my parents especially.
Yeah, my parents definitely, and my grandparents especially. But yeah, no, the backing of art history was, I think, really what sparked our relationship up front. And at that time, I think we were also both on the same plane in that we were really trying to like create a job for ourselves, because we didn't want to kind of take a job that was already out there, or slot into a role at another agency where we wouldn't really have the same influence. It was kind of something we talked about with Carl and Skylar, like building the world that we wanted to live in, like with the people that we wanted to work with every single day, because we spend more time, or at least I spend more time in this office than I do at home on certain weeks. So yeah, like I think the creating a job for ourselves that we actually really wanted was like the driving force, and something we really connected on in that time.
Yeah, and it's like, I feel like we could have all gotten jobs somewhere else, but
I hope so.
But yeah, like we all made it. 5 years. I don't know, we didn't make it yet, but I think the like there's a lot of turnover at these agencies, right? So you could expect to get a job in an agency, but you weren't staying there for too long, so you couldn't really create like a huge impact. That's what I was scared of.
Yeah,
is like, hey, if I go from working my graphic designer job at Ink Entertainment to an agency, how long am I going to stay there? Am I going to be able to create impact?
Want to stay there too?
And the jobs that I think we would have gotten at those agencies weren't decision-making jobs. They weren't jobs that were going to be leading the creative, and they were kind of at old-fashioned agencies.
100%.
So like there are a lot of great agencies in the city now, but I think in the last 5 years, more people have done what we tried to do on that day one, which was, hey, let's come in here and let's do things different. It was kind of like unlearning what we hadn't learned already,
unlearning what an agency was like that we never learned how to do in the first place.
Yeah. Well, that's what Cruel stands for. It's like, that's what it's like starting a agency with your friends with no agency experience.
Yeah, it is kind of cruel starting an agency with no agency experience. Yeah, I mean, I think that whole unlearning piece was like part of us just trying to figure out what we were doing, right? And trying to do it maybe in a little bit of a different way, because I mean, for myself, I was really jaded by the whole process of even applying to work at an agency, because I just wasn't getting responses. And I know why now. I mean, my portfolio was maybe not organized in a way that would have worked for that. But for me, it was about, how can I do this a little bit differently? Because this old model has just been so disenfranchising to even try to get into. I wasn't even in there yet, so I could only imagine what that would have been like.
Yeah, and even like not on the creative side, like on my side, every job I had, I was just so bored. It was just like so corporate.
We're not that entertaining.
The most entertaining. What do you mean? But yeah, like I think even on the like not creative or like more artistic side,
Julia, everyone's creative.
Everyone's creative at Cruel.
This.
Sorry. Yes. But yeah, like I had the exact same experience. And then I came into 35 Liberty, and it was just like, no, I'm staying.
Yeah, it was hard to turn down. No, but I think the whole like everyone is creative thing is something that like we all truly believed in at that time, because we were this group that was trying to figure out how all of our complementary skill sets fit together, and how we were able to kind of like work in an active way. And I think that whole thing about, okay, everyone in the room here should be creative, even if you're doing an accounts role, or even well, I don't want to say the accountant, because creative accounting is something totally different. Every role should definitely have, at least a creative eye or a way of approaching problem solving that was creative, right?
Yeah.
And I think we saw that in some of like the early projects that we worked on. Yeah.
And I think it often gets siloed, right? We talk about creative as being something that happens almost behind curtains. And since day one, like we were all generalists. And maybe that's why we weren't getting good enough jobs.
Yeah, there you go.
But we weren't really wizards at any one thing, right? And like, not to jump right into projects already, but like thinking about that Jazz Cartier Red Bull Sound Selects project that we did.
Fun one.
So that project, they came to us and they were like, "Hey, we have these images. We have no licensed audio. and we need you to make a video. So make a video without any audio
or
and
videos.
no video. But I thought that was an interesting project because one, we masked out the images, we gave them motion, we used
cinemagraphs,
the cinemagraphs, we used sound effects, but it was you, Mac, myself, all in all three programs that we were using. And I think that was what was unique about like our generation a little bit in terms of like how we entered that creative conversation was as a freelancer in Toronto, as a mere graphic designer in Toronto, you had to learn pretty much all of the trades, all of the skills that you could apply because the jobs that we were getting were all over the place, right? So we were applying a lot of creative thinking to different tasks on a day-to-day basis, right?
So definitely creative problem solving because I remember when they came to us and they're like, can you guys do these parallax videos and make them out of images? And we're like, yeah, 100%. And then like turned around, we're like, can we do this? Like, all right, let's figure it out.
It's like wasn't just on like the studio production side. At that same time when all that was happening, that was the first summer that we had a first like large scale sampling across the country campaign. And that's actually, I was a brand ambassador at that time. So I didn't really know what was going on the other side. But like to me, seeing it was mostly like 3 people running that entire campaign, but then learning now that at the same time there was like all these creative projects going on, like that was definitely the first year I would say that's like a real creative agency for sure.
100%. It really was. Yeah. That first year of sampling was definitely like a, the foray into the world that would allow us to build that agency. Yeah. But at the same time, we were building the creative side as well and really formalizing that with, you and Mac and myself. Which was certainly fun, but also like, us just trying to come to terms with like, okay, how do we do this? How do we kind of figure it out?
I was like, whoa, like you work with Mott's Kamado, must be a real company. Like that's a big brand.
I think that, it's funny because like you do get a lot of validation from working with like notable brands and, shout out Go Transit. But you do get a lot of validation from working with notable brands. And I think that like that Jägermeister project we worked on early on where you, Mac, and I kind of just packed up our gear, went out to, Rouge Valley National Park at 5 a.m. and just started shooting was like one of the craziest. I think that was the moment when we started to realize that we could synthesize something that was really special and that there was potential to do this like in an ongoing way, not just in a, in a vacuum.
Yeah.
And learning to work together. Cause I think that was, we're talking about the Jägermeister project, I drank Red Bull actually that morning at 4 a.m. going to Rouge Valley. But, it was just one, like we had a creative team. And I think to speak a little bit to the business level stuff, right? I think what made us different was we're a creative team that had an attached, business lens to it. And the goal was always to be as close as we could to a full service agency because we felt like we could do that with the skills that we had in the room. And we felt like other people were writing us off. So that was like it was always aspirational. Like that was always the goal. But I think the beauty of it now is like sitting here, 5.5 years later, and still the same group. And to the earlier point about like working at an agency, I don't think I'd be still working with the same people if we didn't do this thing for ourselves, right?
I think that's what makes it like really nice to work on. I think we actually take that for granted at times now is that like we are so meshed as a team, and I think that in many instances we already almost know what the other person's thinking a lot of the time, and we're able to come into projects like we've already done the first few pages of work because we have that synthesis of ideas. But yeah, it was moving from that Jägermeister project, going to shoot in Rouge Valley. Like we had that one moment with the bird where, I knew that there was like people that came and fed these birds on this pedestal. We'll put the video up. And I was like, all right, Mac, let's just set up the camera and wait for the bird. We're going to put the Jägermeister bottle on there and that bird like coming in and flying up and like having moments like that where we're like, wow, we have like really cool creative potential here and we can create stuff that is so much bigger than we would have ever done when we were working in a freelance capacity. Like that's really the beauty of working on a creative team versus being a freelancer. So, I think like that's also a time when we really learned, going from like 2017 to 2018, and we had done a few projects. We kind of had stuff under our belt. I think that one thing, especially like Carl and Skylar with their hospitality background, like really taught me was like, we need to provide like a hospitality service for our clients too. It's not just about, making work that clients accept and pay us for, but it's about, making them impressed, like wowing them, but also making them feel like the experience was so positive that they want to do it again, that they want to just spend, every day with us working on these projects. Because ultimately that's what you do with your clients a lot of the time, is like spend, a lot of time with them. So, learning that creative side coming from being a freelancer, but then also learning that like more hospitality side was like a pivotal point for me as well. And being like, wow, I can't just sit at my computer and like work in Adobe programs. Like I need to be a social person that can also interact with clients. And again, that's why I loved what we were doing, because I was able to have a deeper impact that wasn't just sitting at my computer and designing. I was able to do so many more things.
Yeah, and I think with a passion project too, right? Anytime you're coming into something bringing so much energy, it can't just end. It can't just hit a wall when you hit client work. So I think diving in deeper with our clients, getting to know them as people. I think 2018 was a great year for that, with obviously the Supreme Cannabis relationship and 7 Acres and stuff like that. But we made friends that, like, till this day we talk, even though we're not working together as much anymore. We still work together a lot, but we created relationships that we'll bring on into kind of the next chapter, but it also imparted something on the work from that period that made it have an energy that it just wouldn't have if we weren't tight. If we weren't hanging out, if we weren't throwing events at the Supreme office back in the day, you know what I mean, and stuff like that.
And I think too, like, it wasn't just all roses at that time. Like there was a lot of creative differences. There was a lot of like, okay, I want to do this thing, but James wants to do this, and Max telling us we can't do either of them. Like there was a lot of that we had to figure out how to, build a working relationship that was able to be critical and able to be argumentative without being destructive, and still moving the project forward. And I think that when you have clients that are your friends, it like removes so many complications from that. And I remember that time with Supreme and with 7 Acres, working on the cannabis stuff, when they had to, like, someone at Supreme banned off meetings at our office because we were having too good of a time. So they'd come over to do some brainstorm, and then it would turn into like a 3-hour meeting where we were all like smoking blunts and like coming up with creative ideas for stuff that we hadn't even gotten budget for yet. So I think that like client as friends thing was like a new thing for me. And I'd only ever done work for people who I like, wouldn't hang out with on a Friday night.
That the hospitality like angle is kind of what made those people trust us? Because like at that point I was 19 or 20, I guess, and that was like my first summer in the office, and you were what, 23?
Maybe 22,
so it's like, why are these huge corporations like trusting us?
Well, I feel like it removes the divided interest, right? So if you're friends with somebody, like there's less tension in that relationship, and you can talk about stuff, I think, a little bit more openly and plainly, and even saying like, they did ban some meetings at the Cruel office, which we were really proud of. But if you remember that one big meeting, which was arguably, like, we had the entire exec team come to the office thereafter because they were like, all right, let's bring these meetings back. Let's get back into the office together and kind of, riff over some ideas. And I think that's the most important thing. We talk a lot about ideation at our business, right?
Yeah, 100%.
And where creative ideas come from. And like, we put a lot of emphasis on the ideation being free flowing and everyone's creative, meaning everybody can contribute in those sessions, right? So with our clients, they need to contribute. They need to be a part of it. If they don't have a stake in their own work, then what are we doing here? And I do think the hospitality aspect is looped into like our approach to creative, but the creative wouldn't be good if we weren't their friends.
100%.
I think it would be amiss to not talk about the Respect the Plant project at this point.
I mean, that was what, 2 months?
Yeah.
To rebrand and launch, with the launch date being legalization.
Yeah. No, I remember like that one being really, really stressful because it was such a big project and such a short timeline, and we really wanted to really knock it out of the park on that. And I think that why, like, to go back to your question too, of like why we were even trusted with a project like that, was that, one, I think we were trying to provide a bit of a different experience from the other larger agencies that they were looking at, like something that was maybe a bit more personal. We didn't want them to feel like they were just getting a team that was one team we're going to assign to that client. It was the passion of the whole room, and it was the experience that we had actually being cannabis enthusiasts that allowed us to kind of separate ourselves. So
you're a cannabis enthusiast?
I'm not a cannabis enthusiast.
I would have never guessed that.
I don't like cannabis. But yeah, like working on that Respect the Plant campaign and coming up with that tagline was really the meeting of Supreme trusting us so much, putting us in so many situations where, you know, we got to see the facility and the people who worked there, but also the head office and the mind share between the executive team. We saw it from every level, and that allowed us to come up with a concept like Respect the Plant that really encompassed everything that the company valued versus just a look at what the executive team wanted from a marketing perspective, which I think was very different than what they would have gotten if they had just hired a bigger agency to execute on, you know, brand identity. It went a lot deeper than that, right?
Yeah. Well, they wanted us almost to tell them what was going to come from the market.
Yeah.
Because at that time, all the other brands were doing kind of med stuff, felt corporate, you know, it felt like it was done in a boardroom. Mm-hmm. It didn't feel like they were actually trying to understand the culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And for us, like, we were living it.
Yeah.
Especially you, but you know, even the Respect the Plant video. Mm-hmm. You know,
I'm the star.
Yeah. It was the, like, well, let's count Dom's cameos. It was like the Respect the Plant video, the Jägermeister, Shopmeister. Those are your hands. Put that on the screen.
Also my bald head. Wait, can we show my bald patch right here from the Jägermeister video? That'd be great. I didn't realize I was balding until that video. So we sorted that.
That was the awakening.
It really was the awakening. I'm like, shit, I'm in this video and I've got like an island going on in the back of my head. I've got a whole peninsula going on back there.
Yeah. I think with 7 acres, just not to keep bouncing around, but with 7 acres, the amazing part was the opportunity, because we're never going to have an opportunity where legalization is going to happen again. Mm-hmm. We're never going to have an opportunity where we can speak on behalf of almost an entire culture that wasn't being represented, or at least we felt they weren't being represented like wholly or accurately, right?
Well, so did they. I mean, when we spoke with people in the community, they were like all super pissed and rattled about legalization, which was a crazy thing because all I had heard up to that point was everyone talk about legalize it and how much they wanted that. And then obviously it didn't turn out the way that everyone kind of expected and everyone wanted. And I think we're closer to like the end vision now, the future ideal of the plant, if you will. But yeah, it was really a time where we were also tasked with kind of bridging the gap between some of the older executive team who were maybe, you know, a bit less in tune with what this whole millennial culture thing was at the time. And I know, you know, in like 2018, 2019, millennial was like a bad word. It was like we didn't even want to say it because of how much it was used as a buzzword. A bud word, no pun intended. A bud word. But yeah, it was almost like a scary word for us to use because everyone was just demanding, all right, how do we market to millennials? How do we market to millennials? And yeah, the term millennial whisperer.
I was definitely remember being like tasked for my first client meetings of like, you need to bring that millennial perspective. And I was like, well, I'm not even a millennial. Like, I'm a Gen Z, and it's like even better. Like, we didn't
even know what Gen Z like, was at that time. The clients were like, Gen what?
Gen what? No, but they like loved it. Yeah. Like, there was meetings at that time where I remember like brand managers being like, oh, Julia, what's your opinion on this? Even like a name for a product was like something for the RTD stuff. It was like, what's your opinion on this? Like, you're the target audience. And like all the 40-year-olds would look at me and I'd be in the room like, I don't know. I just started working here.
Yeah, those were scary scenarios, but also like, I think why I loved being at Cruel at that time. Because I was like, what do you mean I'm going to sit and pitch to like all these executives of like a $500 million company at the time? Like, what do you mean I'm going to sit here and just give them my idea on weed as a way to like sell this like huge branding project? Like, it was very daunting, but at the same time it gave me so much fuel, so much energy to like keep grinding. And even though we were staying up late and, you know, we would have these, well, I mean, I say we mostly, you would have really late nights at the office.
Oh, should we talk about our first interaction, one of the first like real ones at the 35 Liberty, when I came in early to the office and James may or may not have been sleeping on my office chair.
Listen, we've all had moments where James and I walked in on each other sleeping many times.
And I like walked in and I was just like,
I'm Julia.
Hey, do you want a coffee?
I can't tell you how many times I slept on the love seat, that pink love seat The I quit my job editorial article.
Yeah.
The picture from that is where I used to sleep too. Like that was a very accurate picture, but happened like Mac and I used to sleep up in the loft sometimes when we were editing videos and stuff like that. We definitely
cuddled.
We definitely cuddled. But I don't know. That was part of the experience. And I think some people think that I was sleeping on the couch because we were out drinking the night before, which a year or two earlier.
Opposite.
Yeah, it might have been the case, right? But we were all in at that time, and to your point, like I think your perspective and our perspective on things was actually the most important perspective at that time, and I think we started to recognize that kind of as we got older, as we got through some of the growing pains of, okay, how do we do this? How do we offer branding, content, and experiential all at the same time while still being kind of on the ground and able to execute creative projects? And 7 Acres was like a huge part of that. And we also imparted like a lot of good stuff back because we were kind of stubborn and young. So the commandments.
Yeah.
Right? I love the last commandment. It is my favorite, number 7. Which is create a movement, not an audience.
Yeah.
And that's what we wanted to do. People were looking for how can they reach this audience? And we were saying, well, this audience is very unique.
Yeah.
They're different, and you're not actually going to be able to reach them. You can't fake being part of the cannabis community.
Yeah.
So all you can do is support what they've done to bring us kind of to that position, and then also bring in something that was more fun, right? And I think, with 7 Acres, as we moved on into more like a full service kind of offering and started doing events for them, like for me, respect the culture.
Yeah, that was a big one. Yeah.
That event was, I think, the time where we actually got to be in the room with the movement.
Yeah.
And we got to feel it. So you had cannabis executives there. You had the community there. We had dab stations set up. Yeah.
The dab station was a classic. Yeah, that event, like, throwing basically just like a big party dedicated to the culture that happened on the night of legalization. So like we all like lit a joint at midnight when cannabis was finally legalized. And I remember that's a moment I'll never forget, just because it was such what I felt like was a very historical moment at the time. And we were so entrenched in what was happening in the Canadian scene, which, yeah, we're super lucky to have been given that opportunity and have a group of people that really trusted us to do that too, which was really cool. Yeah, I can't help but think about like, moving into, I think it was like 2019 when we did the Khalifa Kush stuff with them as well. Yeah. And they started to work with Wiz Khalifa, and we were able to throw these like, immersive parties that
was my very first project that basically they were like, okay, you're just going to do this one. It was like, Julia, this was my sink or swim.
Yeah, just manage the Khalifa Kush account. But yeah, no, that was really cool for me. Obviously, I was a big like Wiz Khalifa fan growing up, and in high school and stuff. So that was a very unique one. And I think it really, it really showed that at the time we were able to, again, take that cultural piece and just run with it. And I was nervous as hell doing that project because I was like, shit, Wiz Khalifa, like, fuck. But it was a really interesting time. It was also, a time where we were really upping our skill set on the design side.
Yes.
But also on the design build side, where we were designing structures and buildings and spaces to house our experiential campaigns too, right?
Campaigns. That was sort of the first actual, we're not just giving out product, like it was more built out campaigns with like strategic partnerships and like everything, and making sure our designs were like incredible at that point. Like they were so different from any other, like brands, just tents at that point. Like they were awesome.
We're sampling. I think that's where the sampling and the creative really started to mesh, and where we started to realize that this is one service offering. We're not just doing experiential and just doing creative. It was an integrated model that we needed to bring all that creative talent and mix it in with sampling so we could create these campaigns that were a lot bigger.
That was the year where we had 2 separate drives. We had the creative drive, and then we had like what I don't even know what the other one was.
Probably.
I didn't even go into the creative drive, and then it was like we're merging the drives, and everyone was like, "Ooh."
It was a very
experiential drive.
Experiential,
cruel creative.
Wait, Mac has a mic?
Yeah, dude.
What the hell?
That's incredible.
I've been here the entire
producer
time.
Mic. Okay, I'm
Don't ask me a question far away.
Drive.
You shouldn't have let me know that. That's crazy. No, but yeah, like I think that that was the first time I started to see you do like rendering stuff too, and like really design out the programs. But
2020 was like, everything. It was like we were having such an incredible year, and then 2020, boom.
Yeah, it was
everything put on halt. Marketing budgets cut across the board. Everything, sampling, experiential was not happening.
Well, the trajectory of our business was, so 2019, so the end of 2018, we left Liberty Street.
Yeah.
Yep.
And closed that chapter. Mm-hmm. And that was hard, but we were kind of moving to just a bigger office with a lot of the same amenities.
Maybe
or the
too
same...
big, people were wondering.
Yeah. Well, everybody... It was a big space for the business that we had at the time, but our aspirations were growing. And I think the entire year of 2019 was, how do we realize the vision? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How do we put 30 people in this space? How do we grow our teams? Mm-hmm. How do we just make a bigger family for ourselves, right? It has always been kind of a family affair when it comes to Cruel and, developing relationships with the people we have in the room. I think when you vest over time working with somebody, it just comes, that dynamic becomes more natural, similar to hospitality with clients, but with that collaborative space. So this space was for that. 2019, we worked hard to get the space ready all year, and we threw a party here in December.
Seasonal bush party.
Yeah, holiday party.
Yeah.
Non-denominational holiday
Non-denominational seasonal bush party.
Shout out Joey for the seasonal bush, letting us license that for that event. But it was definitely hard moving into 2020 because the next step was 2020. That was the year we were going to take
the world by storm.
Exactly. And
then
it changed. It changed for sure. And we had to just reinvent what we were doing. And the cornerstone of what we had done since 2016 was experiential. Mm-hmm. That was the block that we built the business around.
Yeah.
And when that block got taken away, everyone kind of looked over at branding and content in our creative business, and it was almost like, you're up.
Yeah.
But I do think that propelled us to a place that it was scary. Mm-hmm. It was scary, but I think we're in a better position than a lot of people, just given our age, given how agile we were as a business and stuff like that. We didn't have it as hard as a lot of people had it.
For sure.
But it was definitely, I think, formative.
No doubt.
Like almost a cultural zeitgeist was happening, and it demanded our work to get better. Strategically, it needed to get better. From aesthetically, it had to get better. Mm-hmm. Like we just had to elevate.
Well, we had to also learn how to now change the workflow that we had built over a couple of years, and just like I was saying, that meshing of the team now had to happen over Google Meets, right? It had to happen in these silos around the city,
the deli,
potentially around the country, right? Like we had people working all over Canada at that time, and it was scary to try to reinvent that idea of how do we work together. I wrote a whole article about it after the pandemic, being like, I lost a lot of my mojo in that time because I wasn't used to working in that environment. I wasn't used to not being able to tap you or tap Mac or tap Justin and say, what do you think about this idea? Mm-hmm. Like, let's bounce it off. Like, let's kind of snowball it and see what happens. That happened over an organized phone call that was very structured, right?
Yeah. Google Meet, sponsor us.
Google Meet, give us
I still remember getting the news of, we're actually closing the office. I remember I was driving down the 400 or something, and I had 3 other people in the car, and the energy was amazing. We get a 2-week break. We get a 2-week work from home, little break, whatever. And it was we can refresh, relax, blah, blah, blah. And then it was no, you have to change everything. The entire trajectory of your business.
We did some great work that year, though. We had the Matcha Dive project we worked on. We did the Yadum project, some really good branding stuff for Malibu Road as well. I think that those projects really showed that we could reform the way that we thought, even though we were all scared and unsure about the future. My parents would call me and be like, aren't you guys an events-based business mostly?
Yeah.
And no, it's good, Mom and Dad, we got this.
My mom used to call, or my dad actually would call me and be like, yeah, okay, great, but how's Carl? Have you checked on Carl?
We think he's okay.
I feel like we're at the point, though, that I also look back on that time really fondly. Mm-hmm. I think some of our best work came out of that period right when the pandemic started, early summer-ish. Mm-hmm. And the word life is just a state of mind to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was a weird moment looking at a piece of work that we'd created at Cruel and being in that moment of the pandemic where we're in lockdown and we're not seeing each other and we're doing Google Meets all the time and saying like, whoa, this is maybe our best project we've ever done.
Yeah.
But we're trapped kind of inside.
Behind
But I felt like we
screens.
took that momentum and ran with it. The remote capture on that, like we got to just show something from that video here. Yeah.
It was also the squad that we had on that shoot. Like it was all people who had been inside, looking at inspiration, creating ideas, or just trying to work on themselves. People who didn't have work yet, people who worked in film and were kind of had the rug pulled out from under them for so much of the year. And getting that group of people, I don't think we'd ever be able to get that same group together again with that much skill in the room, because everyone's off doing their own thing, already, committed to projects and stuff like that. But at that time, everyone was kind of just waiting around, like, ready to work and ready to contribute, and we had such an awesome synergy of talent in that room. It was crazy. I remember just being there and being like, I feel so lucky to just be working with all these people on this, because it was such a cool meeting of so many creative people from the city.
And I feel like projects like that, what they helped us do in a difficult time was lose our imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
We kind of just shed it
100%.
because if we could make it through running the business remotely without the experiential backbone that we had for the first few years, then, I think we came back in here with maybe lighter weight on our shoulders and stuff like that. And I think that really propelled us to go after deeper strategic programs because, we sat at home and worked on them for a long time.
I think that too, like we spent so much time during the pandemic talking about how the world was going to be afterwards, and theories on what the new normal was that everyone was talking about, and how creative would even work if we couldn't be together, and all that kind of stuff. And it really helped us kind of like, create new ideas that we're trying to be more in that thought leader direction than we're just executing this creative. It was like, how can we almost predict what's going to happen next? We spent so much time doing like industry analysis, being like, is the home industry going to take off because everyone's at home now? And looking at all these pieces and trying to figure out what the hell the world was going to be like afterwards. That when we came out of that, we really had like a lot more confidence in our work, a lot more a lot more swagger to our step, even, that we were like, hey, we made it out of the pandemic. We did good work when we were like locked up. That gave me personally like a ton of confidence and allowed me to like approach the business in a new way. And I think that the one thing I took out of the pandemic was like, you can never let your context or where you are or where you live. I used to speak about this when I was younger, and I get so caught up with like, oh, I live in the suburbs, I live in Scarborough, I'm not where the creative stuff happens. But like, it's not about that. It's about building a relationship with your work and the people that you work with. And we made it out of that. And I think that created a lot of synergies in the room and a lot of kind of dynamic workflow.
I think like, don't get it wrong though. Like those 2 years were not easy at all. Like, you know what I mean? Like we're so happy with where we are now and everything, but yeah, like those 2 years were extremely difficult, but that's kind of what allowed us to come out. It's just hard to imagine being able to come out of that not having a team that you've like worked with since 2017. You know what I mean? Those 2 years in the pandemic really made us realize being so hard was, I don't know if we could have really gotten out of it without this group of people. Like that same group of people we've been working with since 2017, which you've said a few times. Like I saw so many companies have a really, really hard time, people leaving, new people coming constantly throughout those 2 years. Some of my friends had like 3 jobs throughout the pandemic because they just like, but with us, it was the same group that was kind of here for 5 years. And I think that really helped.
That's personally, that's what I'm like the most fortunate of. Because I think we've all grown and changed, but the support is just, it's kind of been the main thing. And I think during that time, also being there for each other allowed us to focus on the work, because everything was so distracting. But when you get on a call together and you're both really dialed in on, how are we going to shift these experiential programs into something different for 2021? Because we don't know what the outlook is. And inevitably, events weren't back in 2021, so those programs got shifted into partnerships programs. We did stuff with the Wine Rack and Inniskillen, which was amazing from a Arla Foods standpoint, and Castello cheese and stuff like that. But what we realized was we were able to get over the hump that was the pandemic, and we thought we're never going to be able to use our event budgets for anything else.
Real, yeah.
And we shifted product sampling into a different space. So
we got to do our first big content project with KDP, Schweppes Experiences, which we never thought we would ever do anything like that with that company, which was extremely exciting.
Yeah, what a project.
Yeah.
It was, and we were managing creative in different provinces, and I was doing it from an Airbnb in Prince Edward County.
and there was a product sampling component to that too. So that maybe was the first time, and Mac, I'll get a work check on this one, but fact check on this one. But I think that was the first time we combined that partnerships with explicit content production.
It was,
and that made that program, I think, different as well.
Yeah.
No, 100%. Well, yeah, no, I think that where this has left us is that, we're at a place now where we're still trying to evolve the business, still trying to figure out what the next step was. I think we're all really happy and proud that we kind of made it out of the pandemic. Shout out Justin Trudeau as well. But it was
we have no political affiliations at Cruel.
I'm not.
Honestly, that one shout out
too many. Shout outs?
One shout out too
Come
many
on.
for me. Now.
We're doing the shout outs. That was 5 shout outs. That's not that many shout outs. All right.
You have a microphone.
You tapped out in
don't need to
episode
shout.
1. You get no more shout outs.
I'm gonna take the shout outs.
But yeah, honestly, I agree. And I think the new challenges, and there are new challenges now with the business, and it's about how do we add and continue to grow our family, and how do we use the kind of our experience together, working on these projects, to redefine what an agency can be from a work-life balance, from a culture standpoint, from what's the way we approach our work, right? So we say everybody's creative, and I think it kind of sounds cliche. No, literally, we want every single person in this office to look at things in a way that's divergent. That's not just picking up threads that other people are using right now, right? And simplify that, right? Make it for an audience that's not just us anymore. And I think that's what comes with age and our group growing, is that we're not all millennials anymore, and we're not just trying to reach millennials anymore. We're trying to reach
humans.
Yeah. Anybody that exists with us right now, that's our target.
Yeah.
So
well said. I think that's about it we got for time.
Yeah, before I get
today.
Emotional, that was really beautiful.
That was really well said.
Listen here. Look what if we go back to an old text, I think this was the first podcast. And just, you don't have your phones on you, do you?
I don't. No, I don't.
I'm not going to read it out for everyone, but
you should.
This was the text I sent you guys about the podcast after you guys did it. And honestly, being on a podcast with you guys is kind of fucking wild. But you guys are kind of inspiring too.
This is
and it's
crazy
been
because
a super pleasure to work with you for a few years.
This is a really sweet message and I didn't answer it.
Oh yeah. That's why I did it.
Dom was burnt out after our three
Is this deal actually me?
I have waited 2 years, Dom, to be like, why'd you ghost me on the nicest message? But I think that speaks to these podcasts and how much work goes into it from your side. I get to sit on once and talk with you guys and have this privilege, but the other episodes that are to come, I'm excited for, because you guys are just fire and just a pleasure to work with. And let's not cry. Let's just cut it out.
Mac, am I allowed to say the F word?
Yeah, can I get a readout of that text? Otherwise, I'd just need a screenshot.
I appreciate you guys and continue to get inspiration from both of you. Let's fucking go.
Wow, that's
okay. Yeah. Before I start crying, I feel like we should do our rapid round.
Yeah. Well, let's.
Thank you, James, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much, James, for joining us. And let's get into a segment. Where is my phone? A segment we call Cruel Questions.
We didn't get to do it on the last one because Carl and Skylar spoke too much.
Cue the cruel questions jingle. Cruel questions. All right, James. We're gonna fire some questions at you. You got to choose one thing. Yeah, we'll alternate. I'm gonna say one, and then I'm gonna pass it to Julia to say one. Asics or Adidas?
Asics.
Nice.
Gin or cognac?
Cognac.
Why?
Because it's just better. It's from France.
It's from France. Well, here's a good one.
From the French.
Mies van der Rohe or Dieter Rams?
Mies van der Rohe. Although Dieter is amazing and a better person, has much better values. Mies to me is just visual poetry.
I thought that would be an easy one.
Espresso or mocha?
Espresso or mocha? It's
matcha. I don't have perfect eyesight. Sorry, espresso or matcha?
I was gonna say it was definitely espresso. If it was between espresso and mocha, it's still probably gonna be espresso though, between matcha and espresso.
You got to get a good spro in. Liberty office or Wade Avenue office?
Wade for sure.
Yeah.
But not to say that Liberty wasn't amazing.
I'm allowed to read that one. Arla or Philadelphia cream cheese?
Arla. Don't ask that question again.
All right, here's the best one. Don't ask that question ever again. I can't even read this.
Carl or Skylar?
Carl or Skylar? Sorry, we got the producers.
I was trying to hold it in on that one, but I can't.
Well,
cut the camera.
Listen, I've never been able to have just one. Would be my response.
The answer is Kyler.
Kyler.
It's like a two-headed Hydra thing,
Yeah, that's why the answer is Kyler. Well, look.
I had to drink water for that one.
Well, look. Thank you, James. I appreciate you being on here. It was a pleasure to talk business, talk creative, talk culture,
talk life.
And,
I don't even know if we do a good job.
I hope we did a good job. We'll see.
Find out.
The people will tell. But yeah, thanks for having us. That was terrible.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you
at Cruel in general.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us work here.
But yeah, thanks for coming on the pod, and hopefully we can get you in here again for another session, maybe down the road. But
I'll be back for at least one.
Yeah,
hopefully. Anyway, tune in for episode 3.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
What assholes on episode 3? Oh.
All right.
Bravo.